Working as a criminal defense attorney has always been one tough job, since your conscience is getting tested again and again, and you have to stay rational all the time since everyone is innocent until proven guilty. When I was studying law, I had an idea what I was getting myself into, but only when I started practicing after clearing my bar, I got to know what it was. The first case I got was about a man who got into an accident and the other driver ended up dying. And the man who died was clearly at fault since he was driving under the influence after partying with his friends. So I was about to win the case. Even though I did feel bad about the man who had lost his life, I felt proud about winning my first case. The cases I received after that was perplexing and made me realize the first one was a walk in the park in comparison to all the others, since in my case, there were much evidence and witness against the clients, making it seem like they were guilty of doing the crime. But since my duty as an attorney is to vigorously represent my clients, it was my ethical obligation to defend them. There had been times when I defended those who were wrongfully accused of murder and such, but sometimes the evidence against them was so strong that I lost the case. There's always a 50-50% chance of the client committing the crime or being innocent when an attorney fights for them. And there was often a person who had done a heinous crime and still get away with it due to lack of evidence. So the chances of winning the case are also 50-50, since it all depends on evidence, witnesses, and resources to prove your claim. As a criminal defense attorney, to represent my clients before the court to the utmost best of my ability is my sworn duty. And over time, I defended many from low-life drug dealers to rapists, murderers, etc., who were later found guilty of the crime they were facing trial for. I lost most of the cases, but there had never been a case that left me perplexed, except one. That day I had just returned from a trial that I lost, and I wasn't feeling bad about it one bit, because the person I was defending was proven to kill and mutilate the body of a 3-year-old. The girl was the daughter of her ex-wife, who was conceived after she remarried to a better man, but he was holding a grudge against the woman for divorcing him. So he kidnapped the child and later killed him brutally. When I took the case, I wasn't sure if he was guilty or just wrongfully being accused. But as we proceeded with the case, and as he continued to lie to me time and time again, I figured something was wrong. He also confessed at the end of the trial that he did it because he wanted to get back at his ex-wife for leaving him, and he was given a life sentence. As I rest my body on the couch in the office, hoping to get a little peace, my assistant informed me that a client was visiting the office and wanted to give me her case, so I asked him to send her in and went to sit at the chair behind my desk. A woman with a gaunt face entered the door. It almost seemed as if she was suffering from anorexia or hadn't eaten for days. The dark circles around her eyes were so huge that I could even tell from a distance that she must not be getting her sleep properly. Well, I wasn't one to judge a person's health, since that was not where my area of expertise lies, so I asked her to take a seat and tell me what her case was. She introduced herself as Charlotte Kinney, and the case was about her husband, who was stabbed to death at home after she found out about his affair with the assistant of her therapist. She didn't deny murdering him. Instead, all she said was, "Help me reduce the sentence as much as possible." The way she said it felt as if she was acknowledging the crime, but she didn't think murdering her husband was worth the time she was to receive. Well, this wasn't the first time I had seen a person having such a mindset that their crime didn't deserve the punishment, so I wasn't shocked to hear that. But there was this look in her eye that I just couldn't shake off. It was of someone who was convinced that she would get away. Well, it was just my presumption, and I knew why she was thinking that, but either way, she was going to get at least the minimum of 20 to 40 years in prison, because where she did have disruptive behavior disorder, she was never mentally unstable or weak. Her therapist stated that she was as rational as a normal human, and her condition had improved almost to the point where she didn't need the therapy. The trial began, and it was not going in our favor, since most of the evidence was against her, including the murder weapon that contained her fingerprints. I tried to find all the loopholes I could around this case, but getting her sentence reduced was not an easy task. When the prosecutor offered the plea negotiation, I felt in my gut that the evidence they have found must be something that could prove that my client was innocent, and if she was found not guilty, then there won't be a sentence to be reduced. There was only a 1% chance this could succeed, so it was a bad idea. But I had to discuss this with my client in case she was wrongfully accused, which was not likely the case. Still, you never know. When I mentioned this to her, she agreed to the prosecutor's offer, saying she did not kill her husband, so taking into account the condition of our case and the evidence against her, it was a wise choice. And since the evidence was so strong, the only thing that could prove success was starting negotiating a plea bargain. She was presented at the court and pleaded guilty to the crimes, and admitted doing so before the judge, and after much effort, her sentence was finally reduced by 2/3, and now all she needed was to serve 20 years in prison. There was another possible case coming up against her. If her therapist's assistant was found, or if her body got discovered, since there was a huge possibility that she murdered her as well for having an affair with her husband. But since there was no evidence against her regarding the assistant's disappearance, she would probably be found not guilty, even if the trial was to be held. There was this look on her face, as if she was taken away to prison, that I couldn't quite understand. And when I met her for the last time right after her sentence was reduced and to part ways with her, she said in a low voice that only I can hear, "Don't you want to know why I agreed to this plea negotiation? Or why there were 2 knives used for those 18 stab marks when I could have just used 1? It was the first time I saw her smiling since I took her case." "Why?" I muttered, completely confused. And now that she had mentioned it, my mind started to replay the case in the parts where I was puzzled. For example, in the stabbing wounds, the man was stabbed at the front and back on both sides within a lesser time frame than it would take, and for both sides, a different knife was used, which was weird. I kept thinking she must be some sort of psychopath who liked using 2 weapons, but now that I'm thinking about it, it might not be the case. Upon noticing her dismay, her smile grew bigger, and she walked closer to me, leaning to a few inches distance from my ears and whispering something that left me perplexed. Her words continued to linger in my ears as I watched her leave. Let's just say, my husband Kenny wasn't the one whom Hannah had an affair with. Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so. The client I was treating had symptoms of DBD, disruptive behavior disorder, and time again she mentioned her sudden outbursts in a typical situation. She was seeking my help to keep her marriage life normal since she loved her husband dearly and was ready to get psychosocial treatment. But when my best friend Hannah told me today could end up ruining my reputation as a therapist, who was also working as my assistant, she invited me to a bar that evening, and even though I don't drink much, taking a few shots could never hurt, so I agreed to meet after getting off work. The bar she asked me to meet was always filled with old drunken weirdos, but it wasn't like they were trying to make a pass on me, and if she didn't mind it, who was I to care? I walked to the counter where she was already indulging in drinking and took a seat beside her. Since I couldn't handle my drinks very well, I ordered a low-booze beer and started taking small sips. "So, what was it that you wanted to talk about?" I asked while maintaining my gaze on the beer glass. "What made you think I wanted to talk about something? Isn't it possible that I just wanted to drink with you?" she questioned back, slightly offended by my downright question. "But you do, don't you?" I turned to make eye contact, and she twitched as I hit the nail on the head. "Yeah, I do," she replied in a low tone, turning her gaze away from mine. "So, what is it?" I took another sip of my beer before she started to tell me whatever was on her mind. "I'm seeing Mr. Kenny." I almost choked on my drink from the bombshell she dropped so nonchalantly. "Please say you're joking," I said the moment I stopped coughing, but the look she gave me in response said it all. She was serious about dating my client's husband, Are you out of your goddamn mind? Don't you know the reason Miss Kinney is taking all these therapy sessions? I clenched my fist as I tried to compose my anger. Oh, come on, you know she is a psychopath. He's better off without her. And besides, it's not like he didn't know his wife is doing this for his sake before sleeping with me. Her unconcerned tone only made me perturbed, and if I'm staying any longer listening to her nonsense, I would end up firing her. If this is some sort of twisted joke, I'd let it slide this once. But don't expect me to partake in any of your misconduct. I may be your friend, but don't forget I am your employer even as we speak. I was low-key threatening her by mentioning that before walking out on her. I tried to figure out a solution as I paced back and forth inside my room, but there was nothing I could come up with since the damage had already been done, and if this were to get out, it could badly damage the reputation of my clinic. There was an appointment scheduled for Miss Kinney for tomorrow, and given her current condition, she should not know about her husband's betrayal. But since there was no way I was going to take the blame, I decided to act ignorant about the situation. The next day, as I was sitting in my office, the appointment time for my client's visit approached, and I was feeling rather uneasy about this session, since I knew she was going to mention her husband in our conversation, and it would only keep reminding me of how unfaithful he was being toward her. Being a therapist can be one tough job at points where you can't even help yourself out of some situations, and above all, Hannah was also at work, and she was behaving like nothing had happened, and it angered me even more. I had always favored her for being my friend, but this time she had gone too far to put my reputation at stake, and this was unforgivable. Another hour passed, and it was finally time for her therapy. But adding up to my misery, Mr. Kinney accompanied her for this session. And what got on my nerve even more was Hannah proceeding to the waiting room the moment she heard of his arrival. And the way my client looked at her, I immediately understood that she was onto something. Surprisingly, she did not mention anything of such sort during the entire session. It almost made me believe that she had no idea of her husband's infidelity. The session ended without any issue, and for the first time, she thanked me for helping her before leaving and said that I had helped her clear her mind. After they left, I called my assistant in my office and fired her. And since she didn't take the friendship we shared into account before acting on impulse, so why should I? So I ended my favor here by doing this. The next day, as I was busy studying a case in my office, I saw Sam rushing in, so I asked, "What is it, Sam?" "Miss Kinney, turn on the news. They're all saying she was arrested for murdering her husband," he said in a single breath. I quickly turned the television on and switched to the news channel. The news said a woman in her late 30s stabbed her husband to death for cheating on her. As I watched the news, I got concerned for Hannah's well-being, so I immediately dialed her number, but it was turned off. I remembered that she lived with her mom, so I called her to ask if she was okay, but I got more worried when she told me that Hannah hadn't returned since yesterday. There were a few places I knew she could go, so I tried to search for her there, but there was no sign of her anywhere and her number was still off. I couldn't shake off the feeling that something terribly wrong had happened to her, but I just couldn't figure out what. Did someone kidnap her? Did Miss Kinney kill her as well? Or is she just ignoring me on purpose because I fired her? All of these questions kept running through my mind as I failed to find or get in contact with her. After putting in much effort, I just gave up. A few days later, her mother filed a missing person report, but there wasn't much progress in it yet. We haven't heard from her to this day since she disappeared without any trace, but I'm hoping for her return. She might have messed up someone's marriage, but she was still my best friend, whom I cared deeply about. After a lot of struggle, I was about to start my own business, a home furnishing business. We would go to our clients and furnish their houses in very stylish and aesthetically pleasing way. And the best bit about us was that we were economical and luxurious, however the client pleased. We were pretty certain that our business was in the right shape, and were definitely certain about achieving our quarterly goals. The main focus of our business was to make a client list that could put us onto the map of influential people and earn ourselves a position. As we completely shifted our focus to relationship building and client management, we tend to get more and more outwardly and active in our professional pursuits. One day during the promotional discount week, we got a call from the Douglas Mansion. Now, if you don't know the Douglas Mansion, let me put it this way. If you are in the Douglas Mansion, you are one of the most important people in the city. That was the call that had the potential to not just put us on a map in the city, but the whole country. So we asked, and it was the old Mr. Douglas himself. And he asked, "So yes, you can clean and furnish things in my room, can you?" And I replied, "Yes, sir, we do." To which he said, "You will do it spick clean." And then I said, "Yes, sir, cleaner than any cleanest spot in your mansion right now." Mr. Douglas said jokingly, "Well, I hope you do. It is a mess in here. And yes, you do have to sign NDA and some documents. We will hold you liable if anything is lost." At first I hesitated, but then it was the big break we surely could have used, and I agreed to his terms. It was pretty sure that once I entered the house, my business will definitely take off amongst the likes of these multi-billionaires, and I was in no way ready to let this one opportunity go away. So instead of sending off my usual people, I myself took charge and made a team of the other two people who originally started this business with me, and we went to the mansion the very next day. Upon entering and parking our car in the big driveway, and before entering the house through the big door in front, a guard came with a bunch of NDA and contractual papers. He gave us the envelope, but told us to sign the NDA before entering. Knowing this to be the opportunity of lifetime, we were ready to sign them. The worst scenario that we had in our mind was of a sexual dungeon that we just might discover in the basement. As we enter, we are greeted at the staircase with Mr. Douglas, the owner of the mansion. He asked us if we had signed the NDA or not, and upon telling him that we have, he decided to tell us a short story as we started walking up the stairs. My son returned later last night. He was a bit intoxicated and he came up to my room. He decided to indulge a bit of intervention with his dear old dad. I was in my bed in the sheets, and he came closer and told me that he had ideas to make the company better, and I told him that we will talk business in the morning, but he was quite adamant about telling me now. So he took his gun and then pointed me. Definitely some kind of distrust thing going on with kids and parents, but Emily, her girlfriend who was sleeping with me and was behind the curtains at the time, came in and smashed the ashtray on his head. He turned in pain and shot her 3 times. We gave a little smirk, thinking maybe billionaires have twisted humor. He stopped in his tracks and then opened up a room near the balcony. And as we entered, we were blank in shock. His son was lying on the bed with the bandages around his head, while the family doctor stood there checking his vitals as if he was unhinged by the room. Mr. Douglas continued, "Yeah, so she died, and he made it. It wasn't that rough on him, but he did stupidly shoot the poor girl. She was going in bed, I must tell you that. Very good, these young ones." I was in total shock, and I couldn't shake myself back to the present. And as I tried my best to compose myself, "Well, you did sign the NDA, so in case you want to go and try tell this to people, you will be legally held for this, and by the looks of you, you definitely will not be able to pay me $10 million. So it is better that you get back to work, and I will put in a good name for you with my friends. And do look in the envelope, it is pretty sweet." We just witnessed a murder confession, and we did try to mumble our way out, but we had no choice. Me and the other 3 partners gathered together, and we realized that there is no way out because of the NDA. So the only reasonable thing at the moment was to do that. We did refuse him the service, but his crazy-looking security guards were very stern and definitely looked as if they would kill us. We were scared, confused, and very much in a moral conflict. We decided to open up the envelope, and there it was. The number of zeros in the envelope made us forget about the moral conflict. There was a spark in the eyes, and as we were busy thinking how to go through with it, some of the security guys dragged a fridge inside and told us to dispose the body in the fridge. And then they just walked away. Seeing the doctor was out and the guards too, I decided to take the photographs of the crime scene just in case it is ever needed in future, Not to forget the moral conflict that seemed to have gone with the money was actually there building within. I store the photographs in the cloud, just in case they tried to go through my phone once we were done. We arranged everything and made the room cleaner than it ever was. The blood-soaked carpet was completely spick, with no sign of visible spot anywhere. They were rearranged and replaced with a place smelt like lavender and rose instead of death. Mr. Douglas was happy with our job, as the doctor guided the guards to take the body to the basement. Turns out the doctor will then use the organs and black market, and this was not the first time that they have done it. And I wondered about the countless victims that might have not gotten justice. But then my darker side of greed did take over, and I ended up helping him completely rid that room of any signs of violence, and even made it much more beautiful than he was. And that is how the visit started. It was Mr. Douglas at first, and then it started happening with all his rich friends too. Ancelotti, the Silverbergs, Weinsteins. We were all busy cleaning up their messes and were making really good money. In the next 5 years, we did build our business to top, but it all worked in the shadows, cleaning the filth of the richest scum on the planet. I waited for 5 years, through and through, going through this moral hell. Finally, with enough money to bail me out from the NDA, I went to see a lawyer. I told him about everything that happened with us through those 5 years and explained to him about things we went through. He looked at me and said, "It is a little too late for you to be morally woke now. You tell the police, they will put you behind for a long time. You have been an accessory and accomplice in the murders, so if you are ready to risk yourself to go to prison, then yeah, we can proceed." A dark, silent chill went across my spine, making me wonder and making me question my own morality. And as I stood there asking myself, am I willing to risk my own freedom? I received a call. It was Mr. Douglas. "Hey, send your boys, will you? I think my son made a mess again." I hung up and looked out the window. As the sun was going down, I had to make a choice, and so I did. As we entered the Douglas mansion, we saw that Mr. Douglas had killed his son.
I'm your typical 21-year-old American girl. I grew up in the suburbs and had a pretty nice upbringing. Unfortunately, I had been a total party girl up until the time I turned 20. That was when I started getting my stuff together. I nearly died of alcohol poisoning one night, and despite being surrounded by some of my friends, nobody even bothered to help me. Even when it was obvious that something was wrong, I'm not gonna lie to you, I was a really crummy person when I was younger. One of the things I remember doing with my friends was teasing a really unpopular kid. I get asked out by a fair amount of guys, and I'm not the ugliest girl in the world. My friends and I all had an Algebra 2 class towards the end of high school, and one of the boys in it always seemed to be checking me out. I really regret being mean and teasing him because he was honestly a pretty nice kid, just kind of socially awkward and completely lacking in any sense of fashion or style. One day after class, my friends and I were talking about a party for that weekend. He must have been listening in on our conversation because he came up to me and asked if I needed someone to go to the party with. I don't really know what he was expecting, but I went with it on a whim. I told him that I really needed a nice guy to go with me so people would think I have a boyfriend. He agreed to go with me and said that he would pick me up before the party. We exchanged phone numbers, and that was that. My friends and I were already plotting on how we were going to embarrass him on the night of the party. I told him that it was a professional party. He told me that he had to go out and buy a tuxedo then. Me, being the horrible person I was back then, totally agreed. He picked me up in his mom's car before the party on Friday night. He even brought me flowers. It was at that point that I started to feel guilty and kind of wanted to abandon the whole thing. I couldn't do it though. My friends would have been really mad at me. They got 2 giant tubs of mayonnaise that they were going to pour on top of him. It was my job to have him stand for a picture and get him in the right position. Then I will tell them that I had to go to the bathroom real quick and for him to stay in place. and that's when my friends were going to pour the mayonnaise on him. Again, I regret that whole role I played in this whole thing. I even felt guilty at the moment when I walked away, and I actually went to the bathroom. I didn't want to watch it happen. From what I heard, he started crying and went back to his car and drove home immediately. I thought that would have sent some kind of a signal that I really wasn't interested in dating him. Well, he didn't quite get that signal, because he still kept trying to talk to me and go out on another date. He even tried asking me where I went that night, and it made me feel even worse than I already did because he didn't even realize that I was in on the joke. Like he thinks he randomly got mayonnaised. As guilty as I felt, I just tried to ignore him and hope the problem would go away on its own. We only had another month or so of algebra, and it was every other day, so I figured the number of times I had to see him were limited. Well, he never actually got the hint. He found me on Facebook and messaged me on there. He somehow found my phone number, which I still don't quite understand how he did it either. Suffice to know that he still regularly made an attempt to date me for a very long time. I tell you this story not for fun or to brag, but because this guy, Donald was his name, continued his interest in me for 6 years. Still, even to this very day, we've been out of high school for years now, and he still messages me or reaches out in some way every few weeks. After I started getting my life together, I tried explaining to him that I wasn't interested in him, but he never really got the message. I work a night shift job now, at a gas station on the edge of town. For the most part, we only really ever got truckers and the occasional traveler. Anything else is pretty rare, but sometimes on certain nights, around 3 o'clock in the morning, Donald will show up, and he's not looking to get gas. He's looking to get me. It's only happened 3 times now, but they were honestly pretty horrifying, and I nearly called the police the last time. I think I will if he shows up again. The first time he showed up where I worked, he tried pretending like it was a coincidence. Like, "Oh, hey, I didn't know you worked here. I was just buying one candy bar at a gas station at 3 o'clock in the morning." You know, the usual. And that night was really weird. The second time he came by, he told me that it was a long drive from his house to the gas station, but he said that it was worth it because the candy bars at this gas station were the best. Bear in mind, this guy was buying plain Hershey milk chocolate candy bars every time he came in, and not in bulk either, literally just one every single time he came in. Like, could you get any weirder? This last time that he came, though, that was the time that really freaked me out. He's a lot rougher now that he's been out of high school. I think he works at some kind of manual labor job, or maybe he's just a dirty person. He always looks really disheveled when he comes in. And he walked into the gas station, bought his usual chocolate bar, but instead of leaving, he just stood there. I was standing at the cash register, just kind of awkwardly waiting for him to go, but I handed him back his change and receipt and just watched him stand there and stare at me, like dead-on staring me in the eye. I felt extremely uncomfortable and didn't know exactly how to end the social interaction. I asked him if he needed anything else, but he just said no and then continued staring at me. And that was when he reached over the counter and tried holding my hand. I could tell by the look on his face that he had some sort of intimate intentions in his mind, something devious. As freaked out as I was, I pulled my hand back as fast as I could and told him that he had to go. "Why are you gonna be like that? I love chasing you, but you gotta give in one day," he said to me. And that was when I told him that I was not interested in him at all, and the only reason I went on a date with him was because I was in on the joke to pour the mayonnaise on him. I told him that I wouldn't date him if he was the last guy on earth and that I would never be interested in him. I saw his facial expression go from nefarious to angry. He knocked a bunch of gum off of the gum rack before storming out. Before he walked out the door, though, he stopped and looked me right in the eye and said, "I'll have you one day, you little pretty princess." And then he left. I had no idea how to respond. I don't even know what to do about the situation. He's not really doing anything illegal, I don't think, other than knocking things over. If I see him again, though, I might have to call the police. If this isn't stalking, then it comes pretty darn close. And the part that kills me about the whole thing is that I just want to put that phase of my life behind me. I don't want to think about being popular or partying or being mean to kids like him. I just want to save up some money, get my life together, and maybe find a good boyfriend. But yeah, that's my ongoing situation with a very creepy guy I played a prank on from high school. And looking back, I never should have gone along with it. I should have followed my intuition and done the right thing. Instead, I guess I have to pay my dues for what I have done in some way. Maybe this is some weird form of justice.